I also did one-on-one reference calls of Propelics' previous customers, specifically talking about the Kickstart, because it's not, a fine and dime cost. And I only heard extraordinary things, and that really was the turning point. Hey, Steve. It's Cathy and Noori.
Hey, Cathy and Noori. How you doing?
Good.
I apologize for any squawking that you may hear. There's a cat roaming around, and so the chickens are kind of nervous right now. And they're all at my window.
Nice. It'll be an interactive podcast.
Yeah, the timing's a little funny on this cat visit. Doesn't happen that often, but
I know there's a little animal farm going on over there.
Yeah. I think they could take the cat on. I don't think they have anything to be worried about, but so welcome to Device Squad, everybody, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics, an Anexinet company. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. We've got a really full house today. We're going to be doing a sort of a project retrospective with Canopy Health. And we've got, on our side, we've got almost the whole team. We've got Andres, who has been on the podcast before. He's our lead designer. We've got Cesar, the programmer, and we've got David Enarson, the strategist. Was that right? Did I get all your roles right from that?
No.
No? I'm already screwed up.
Yeah, I was the technical architect.
You're a technical architect now?
Yeah, it depends who has chief architect for mobility, technical architect for some projects.
Oh,
Always
it's
having
Cesar.
fun.
It's you, Cesar. I thought you were David for a second. I apologize for that misunderstanding. And on the Canopy Health side, we've got Noori Dhillon, and she is Director of Product Strategy at BayHealth Development. And we have Cathy Farmer, who is Director of Mobile Web Delivery at BayHealth Development. And the chickens are getting chatty. So I just thought it would be fun. This project is sort of wrapping up. So I just thought it would be fun to go over the successes that we've had and how everything turned out. I was on this project just at the beginning, so it's fun for me to get a refresher on what happened and how everything went. Cathy and Noori, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? And I'd love to hear a little bit of your background, how you wound up at Canopy and what your role was in this project.
I was the first IT employee here at BayHealth Development that does all the IT services and strategy for Canopy Health. And that was in 2016. I started my career as a developer some time ago, and then spent a long time in health IT. I was at 15 years at Kaiser and very involved in startup communities, mostly at the University of California, Berkeley. And I joined BayHealth after I worked on my startup for 2 years and decided to go back to traditional job. and came here, and it was perfect fit because it was doing software development in the space of web and mobile that I've worked on for years, and it's all still startup-y. So it was a great fit. So that's my background.
Yeah, I'm Noori Dhillon, and my background started with UCSF. I worked a lot in their Epic EHR implementation across the inpatient side, across the cancer center, outpatient and inpatient. So I moved from the provider side to more of the commercial side, worked for a startup that was partnering with UCSF, helped build that product up from ground up as one of their first employees, and then moved here to BayHealth. And BayHealth is exciting because we get to sort of play this role for Canopy Health and the Alliance network for Canopy Health, and looking at it from both a provider lens and a payer lens, and kind of sitting in between those spaces is really neat and interesting for me.
Just so people understand, what's the relationship between BayHealth and Canopy Health?
We're both joint ventures of UCSF and John Muir Health. BayHealth Development does IT strategy and services on behalf of Canopy Health. And we also do other projects with our parents and our partners as requested and needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another arm of BayHealth is to develop care delivery sites for UCSF and John Muir, which we recently helped open up a outpatient center in Berkeley, and we also provided a lot of the IT infrastructure support for that care delivery site as well, in addition to our work with Canopy Health.
Great, thanks. So why don't you give us some background on what Canopy Health's mission was and what made it unique?
Canopy Health is the first real game changer in a long time in the Bay Area when it started in 2015. It's basically owned by physicians and hospitals. It's a community of caregivers, focusing on health and improving health and advocating for the entire Bay Area. And the other thing that's really interesting is that we have the largest physician network in the entire Bay Area, exceeding Kaiser Permanente's volume of physicians, which makes us a really great plan to connect with because there's lots of PCPs and a lot of specialists, especially those from UCSF.
Yeah, and the network is around 5,000 doctors, 18 hospitals in the Bay Area, and we're expanding our geography, moving more south in the South Bay territory. It's a great option for folks that work in a different area and live in a different area in Bay Area, as we all know. Lots of commuters here, and being able to access a broad network of doctors across the Bay Area geography, I think, is really unique.
On your website, you have the slogan that Canopy Health provides refreshingly clear human care. I'd just love to hear more about the origin of Canopy Health and what you felt was like missing in the marketplace that inspired you all to pursue this project and to take on this mission.
There's a lot of big players in the Bay Area market. We have Kaiser, we have Sutter, and then there's a lot of great institutions like UCSF, like John Muir, et cetera, in the Bay Area, I think that are all looking for strategies to expand access to their services to the likes of Kaiser, to the likes of Sutter, and so forth. And I think it's really neat to see large health systems come together like UCSF, John Muir, and the other partners of Canopy Health Alliance. I think the direction is changing in healthcare and the models of payment are changing in healthcare. And I think these organizations are being strategic in how they're approaching the new direction and being forward thinking, and how are we going to compete? How are we going to provide better care in this new society? And I think Canopy Health is pretty forward thinking if you think about it.
We also knew that we wanted to have really great digital products early on. There are signature moves, and Noori can talk about that in a minute. And one of them was 24/7 care and transparency. And we built our apps when we started partnering with Propelics in late 2016 with that in mind. Noori could add more about the signature moves because I think they tell you the business reason behind the work we did on the product side, and then we can talk about the history of the tech side as well.
Yeah, so the signature moves are sort of our brand promises to the Canopy Health member. And we wanted to be able to deliver on these brand promises. And part of that is through technology, and part of that is through operations and other services, non-technical side. But the first one, as Cathy mentioned, is 24/7 access to care. And I think across this network, across this broad network, we wanted the Canopy Health members to be able to have an option for care after hours. You know, your PCP is not always available, your specialist may not always be available, but you need care in the middle of the night, on the weekends. And how we delivered on that on the technical side was implementing a 24/7 on-demand urgent care solution, a video visit urgent care solution in the MyCanopyHealth app. And that allows members to be at their home and receive care at their home and not have to go to an urgent care center or not have to try to figure out how they can quickly get in contact with their PCP after hours, and really try to blend the care with a person's lifestyle. And I think that's important. We all lead very busy lives. We're in the Bay Area. There's a lot of hustle and bustle over here. And trying to fit in care in that and making care a priority, we want to try to be able to enable access to as many care options to the member to meet them where they're at. So that was one of the key ones, was 24/7 access to care. The second one was cost transparency. And we wanted to be able to provide clarity for members for their healthcare costs, specific to them, specific to their plan, specific to their spending. There's a lot going on in the cost transparency space, but it's still hard for consumers to understand truly what and anticipate what their out-of-pocket expenses may be for certain shoppable services, as we call them. There's always unexpected healthcare services that come about if you get in an accident or you have an unforeseen condition that comes about. But there are sort of planned services that we wanted to be able to provide transparency for the member to understand their costs. So we developed a cost estimator tool in the app and portal, in the MyCanopyHealth app and portal. It's really simple, easy to use. And the point is to really help educate the consumer on what their cost is, how their plan benefits work, and their actual spend to date for themselves and for their families. So that was the second, cost transparency. And the third is access to a broad network. And on the operational side, that means being able to have access to the multiple alliance providers and partners that we mentioned, the 18 hospitals, 5,000 doctors, members to be able to have a primary care physician with, you know, John Muir and be able to see a specialist at UCSF or any of the other network participants. And, you know, it just really enables access to a member across a broad geography like the Bay Area. And from the technical side, what we're looking to solve, which is not live yet, but we're looking to really integrate the referral platforms across these organizations to be able to seamlessly have referrals be sent from one organization to another, which mostly to date is done by fax, and be able to provide visibility into referral status for members, because once a referral gets placed, sometimes the member is sort of lost in terms of where they're at. So those are the three brand promises, and happy to answer any more questions about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. My own family experience, I mean, it's taken like 5 years for us to figure out how to estimate our average medical costs and then, you know, try to decide what our ideal plan would be based on that. And I still have no idea if it's actually going to work out in our favor this year from year to year. So that's amazing that you were able to conquer that. If you could just give a summary of the specifics of the deliverables. Noori talked about the goals of the project, but I'd like to hear what the actual components of the project consisted of.
When we first were introduced to Propelics, they introduced us the processes around the Kickstart, which forced all of, at that point we were a smaller startup with just, probably 10 of us down in the third floor. And it was a process that Propelics has a unique way to gather and garner requirements and prioritize them with stickies and evaluations of all sorts of metrics to decide what are the best value adds to add to the app and the portal and the web. And that was a really good exercise that forced the executives to get really close hands-on to decide really from a feature function of what's important. And then after we did the Kickstart, we were working on the framework of the app, but we did an immediate provider directory activity to get it on the platform with Progress Kinbay. That went really well, and then we did a bunch of proof of concepts for integration. So those were stepping stones that BayHealth worked with Propelics on to really make us have the framework for success. And we must have done, Cesar, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we must have done 10 integrations in that POC work of April of 17.
That sounds about right. Yep.
So we integrated with Salesforce, we integrated with Redux, we integrated with Adobe, we integrated with many others.
This is David, mobile strategist at Propelics. So when we started partnering with Canopy, we first approached it from a strategy perspective. So we collaborated on various Kickstarts, one being evaluating the various aspects of digital strategy. So looking at all of the use cases and prioritizing them and really looking at the business from that lens. And then from there, once we had the prioritized roadmap, it really became a lot of partnership through iterative design sessions to design out a roadmap of what a first phase of a member-focused experience could be. And then we built out designs for each of those features, and then they were prioritized, and then we got into a development mode. And we've since been working with Canopy for a while to release the app into Google Play and into the iTunes Store, which is exciting. So that's a summary of what we've been working on.
So what was it about Propelics that encouraged you to choose us? Were you familiar with our strategy process and our...
Nope.
No?
No, we were not. When we were first introduced, we were introduced by another vendor. And at the time, the interim CIO from UCSF and I, we interviewed a few different companies, and Propelics just with that process seemed exactly what BayHealth and Canopy Health needed. They needed some hand-holding to get to that happy path to what we really need on the roadmap. And that was a great exercise. And I think that's what was the turning point, was seeing what the Kickstart can do. I also did one-on-one reference calls of Propelics' previous customers, specifically talking about the Kickstart, because it's not, a fine and dime cost. And I only heard extraordinary things, and that really was the turning point. We're a new organization, so it wasn't like we were retrofitting other work that we had previously done, with the exception of integration, right? That was one thing that as we were going through the process, that this is all new. We want the latest and the greatest. We want the best that we can give our members, because we are going to be refreshingly clear and wonderful. So that was really important. And then I think the big things that came out was for sure a cost estimator, for sure, the provider stuff and communication with our members properly. The virtual ID card was really important to make us that we're one of the few that, if anyone has that, I think we're one of the few that have that ability for the millennials, people who are more prone to use the phone. Those are just a few that come to mind that came out of there with people really excited. I mean, Noori and I did a demo of the product to some of our board members. One was a physician at UCSF, and she just sent a beautiful complimentary email to us, which was unexpected since she is a naysayer. And, she looks at portals and web apps all the time. And it's like, the same old. But when she saw our demo of both the portal and the app, she thought we were a differentiator, and she was super excited. And that made us feel pretty happy. And I sent that along to Propelics.
And I think something that's valuable to add to that, this is Noori, and others, so feel free to chime in, is having the blend of experience that we did. I think Cathy and I have more healthcare background, working in technology and healthcare organizations like Kaiser, like UCSF. But having other team members with other industry experience, I think, is very valuable. It helps you really look at, really from a consumer lens, not really a patient lens, right? Because that line is very it's fine between a patient and a consumer, and everybody has high expectations for healthcare now. And I think it really helps to have that experience across the team, which I think the Propelics team really brought.
Yeah, let me just add to that really quick. The UI team and everybody, I mean, from the architects to the UI team to the strategists, just did a great job with what Noori just talked about, bringing that unique perspective, making us think about things from a different angle that we normally wouldn't think about. That was really valuable.
That's great. That's a great lead-in because I wanted to get Andres in here doing some talking. I toot his horn a lot because I think he's like one of the greatest designers that I've ever worked with in terms of he's not just a designer and he's not just a traditionally trained artist. He also has, a real understanding for human interaction. And so he can play both of those roles, which is pretty unusual. So Andres, I'm trying to remember, did they come to us with an established design direction?
Actually, yes, Steve. I remember we got a brand guidelines document. I think the agency is called Monster, right, Cathy? Monster.
Yes, that's correct. Monster
yeah.
and the floor marketing.
So they did a great job putting together the brand guidelines for Canopy. So we followed that direction. Of course, in the mobile world, we needed to change a little bit, a few colors and enhance the elements so they can look pressable for the user. But actually, yes, since the beginning, the brand has been looking really good.
So how did you approach this, taking a really complex project like member portal for a healthcare organization with price estimators and all these things? How were you able to simplify this down to fit into a mobile app?
I remember we started the first approach. It was the Kickstart, as Cathy said. And we started with a prototype exposing all this functionality that was new for the market. The cost calculator, the telehealth, and some other functionality that was top of the line. We had the idea of creating this prototype so the executive team Canopy have sense of the importance of launching an app like this. So we took 3 weeks creating and designing this prototype. We worked together with Cathy and another team members from Canopy. We stayed late working on the design. It was Nitin, the one that was first involved as a strategist, and then David took over. So the first impression, the prototype, was something that allowed us to continue with the same piece. Speaking about the technology integration into the project, of course, we didn't incorporate all that functionality at the first phases, but until this point, I think it's a nice product and it's something that all the design team, because it wasn't just me, a few other designers like Emilio and Ali has been working with this project. And I think it's something that we should be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about the integration a little bit. You touched on it. So I'd love to pass it over to Cesar and hear about what some of the integration challenges were when you're working with healthcare data and so forth, and how the team was able to overcome them.
Thanks, Steve. So I would define the integration challenges in 3 different sections or buckets. The first one that Cathy mentioned, we did over 10 different POCs with different systems, different technologies, different partners that we needed to integrate. And we decided which ones were aligned to what we wanted to do first and start to phase that out. So even though some of these early POCs didn't actually made it to this first release, they are ready to be taken over on a future release. And along those lines, healthcare, as you can understand now, it's very complicated to have something standardized. There are a few standards out there and all the companies are working towards that, but it takes a lot of time, EHR records, member data, and all of that on top of the security that you have to have on top of it. It's one of the biggest challenges. So between Canopy Health and the technical team, we had to design this data model that will expand will be flexible, and it wouldn't be constrained to not evolve and say, oh, okay, so we did it to up to 2018, but if we want to go towards other integrations, then we cannot expand more. How do we capture the data security requirements for front and back end on that sense? The second section would be, okay, how do we serve this great data into two different applications, right? So we put together the middleware, Cathy mentioned it, Progress Team as the middleware, where some capabilities were ready to be deployed for the member portal, the provide directory that she mentioned in kind of like a alpha release of one of the first iterations of the digital strategy. And then at the same time, start working on two different mobile apps, figuring out the strategy to build those apps, because at the end of the day, the same middleware backend is serving iOS, it's serving Android, and it's serving mobile web. And some capabilities are specific to one of those. As a quick example would be, for example, Touch ID and Face ID for Apple. In Android, we have the fingerprint. On web, we got to make sure that we have security on the browsers and making sure that the session management in the browser is handled a little bit different. So deploy everything that can be the same for the three platforms in a seamless way, evolve, make sure that when we do a new release, we don't break anything of the current app users. It's easy to control the web portal because we deploy it on the server and that's it. But then we have to wait for users to update their apps from the App Store as well as the Google Play Store. So that proved to be the second section of challenges. How do we deploy this information? And the third one was working together with UI UX, with the strategy, and find that good balance between, okay, let's build this functionality of a cost estimator, but at the same time, let's spend the time to have this integration with Apple Wallet or have this Face ID, Touch ID, because those are technologies that every mobile app user will expect to have in a modern app, in something that it is new. And it's something that we have to balance it out with ID card, the search of the providers, get directions to them. So all those calculations. So working on that balance. So that will be the third bucket of challenges.
What were the two mobile apps again?
Well, the Android app and the iOS app. So on that end, we decided to go with a cross-platform development tool. So reuse as much as we could from business logic, data model, and then have a specific iOS UI and Android UI. So each one of those users, they will feel like they're in the native platform, and they will have the same interactions that we will have with the standard OS.
So we're talking about so many disparate things. You've got the web portal, you've got Android and iOS platforms. What did you guys do to create brand consistency across all of these different avenues?
From a design perspective, we have style guides. So we have, as Andres mentioned, we use the brand guidelines from Monster as a reference, and then the team develops style guides for each of the platforms. And then in general, from a strategic perspective and from a functional design perspective, we're always working with Canopy to solve like the problem for the member, the problem for the end user. And then as we're doing that, we make sure that we take into account the different design patterns for, like, for example, mobile. You're going to accomplish the same business goal in, like, say, a cost estimator, but the workflow might be slightly different because the way someone interacts on their phone is different than how they interact on their laptop. And also we made sure we had a really integrated design process when we were communicating with the tech team, communicating with the design team, writing requirements, and made sure that those requirements were synced up across both of the platforms. So we really looked at it from a solution perspective, and then how we applied that to each of the platforms to make sure that there is consistency across them.
So with all these different technologies being brought into play, what proved to be the most difficult integration and why?
I can answer that question, but I'm sure the team, I'd like to hear if they have the same answer.
I know what your answer is going to be. And
we should all say it on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Amwell.
Yeah.
And if Amwell's listening, we love you guys.
Yeah, and it was just because we were the first customer to utilize the SDK, and that was part of the challenge. But I'll let the team talk further.
Yeah, I can kick it off. So the goal with the Amwell implementation, so Amwell is the vendor we chose to really be the platform for enabling video visits, the 24/7 access to care. We chose Amwell for a number of reasons. I think they're one of the leaders in the space. It's a really heavily saturated market, but I think they're doing a great job of looking at how their platform can be dynamic and fit a number of use cases down the road that we're looking at to leverage telehealth and virtual care capabilities. So from a platform perspective, the flexibility and their roadmap really aligned with what we were looking for. So I think that was the reason why we went down that route. But as Cathy mentioned, we were one of the first web SDK customers. They had implemented their mobile SDK probably a few times, and that was challenging as well. But I think that the team did an excellent job, the Propelics team, lots of sweat and tears that went into the process, and patience that went into the process to really partner with Amwell and really figure out the kinks. And I'll let you lead into that, David.
Sure. Thanks, Noori. So yeah, I definitely agree that, whenever you're faced with a complex technology and you've got to bring it together, the number one thing is collaboration. So all of the teams, the Amwell team, Canopy team, and Propelics, we all work really closely together. As Noori had mentioned, this was a pioneering effort as far as launching both a web-based platform and the mobile platform through the software development kit at the same time. So that had, a share of challenges with integrating, various API methods and calls and uncovering issues and then, working through those roadblocks. And then another thing, and this is why, it was important to look at it from an SDK perspective, is that the video visit functionality is completely integrated into the experience for the member. So as a member, when you go to the site, there is a Powered by Amwell logo, but it enables Canopy to maintain their brand presence, and it enables an integrated experience for the member, which is really important. And so in order to do that, it required a high level of design to be able to, create all the functionality. The Amwell system does offer a very robust feature set of being able to, capture all of the intake information, a lot of different content, and being able to send that and sync that with providers and then facilitate the video conference. So in doing that, in providing that experience to the member, there is a lot of complexity in syncing all of those components. And I don't know, perhaps Cesar wants to take that kind of from more of a technical side, but at least that's how I see it from the functional perspective.
Yeah, I can wrap it up on the technical side. So all of those were the business requirements, and we wanted to give the same experience no matter if you're an Android user, an iOS user, a Webflow user. So the biggest challenges were to integrate between the backend systems. So we divided basically the digital group or the technology group into the front-end web development team, the front-end mobile development team, and the integration development team. And this is just on the Propelics side. So each one of them were communicating with the Amwell implementation team, we're communicating with Canopy Health, and we were trying to make sure that if one feature was going to be able to make it in one platform, the other two were ready as well. So a little bit of divide and conquer, a lot of orchestration on that end. And as David said, you don't even know, you don't have to go out of the mobile app to have your video visit. It's all integrated between SDKs, client SDKs, connecting to different backends. So in this case, the Amwell backend for a lot of the video content, but also with the Canopy backend for all the data and your member information, your insurance information is all there.
That's so cool. I just want to review that feature just so everybody understands. It's such a market differentiator. So this feature actually allowed members to have one-on-one basically a one-on-one medical consult with who? With a physician or a physician's assistant, or who's on the other end?
So it's a consult, on-demand, video-based consult with a physician. And think about your experience when you go to an urgent care center. So let's say you you have a sore throat and you have a fever, and one of your care options at that point is going to an urgent care center. Generally, you have to fill out some forms. You have to provide some background information, some health history information, sign a privacy practices notice, and then you sit in a waiting room, and then once your provider is ready, then you go see your provider and they assess you, and then they give you potentially a prescription, and you have to go pick up the prescription from the pharmacy. So that's generally your experience that you have if you were walking into an urgent care. What we did was really simulate that experience from a digital perspective, and all those steps we've tried to simplify and streamline. And so part of the complexity of the integration was that you're really building this whole clinical workflow that generally happens in person. You're building it over the phone or over the web, and all those steps of intake and consenting to forms and providing payment and waiting in a room, which we actually have a virtual room, which the patient waits in when the provider is reviewing the information that they entered in. They also now have the ability to invite other guests to the video visit, as if you bring your husband or your sister or your brother to your urgent care appointment. You can also invite them in if they're in a different state or in a different city. And at the end, the provider may prescribe you a prescription, and it gets sent to a prescription of your choice nearby where you're at, no matter whether you're in California or you're traveling to another state for work or for pleasure. And you're able to pick up your prescription, and you have a visit summary that gets sent to your primary care physician with your consent. So that's really some of the high-level features in that workflow that we built in for video visits.
That's so amazing. I mean, it's one thing to talk about, having a cost calculator and so forth, and that's great, but a lot of that stuff is so abstract to people, and whereas having something like that where it's like literally a very visual experience. So like from a marketing perspective and from a brand perspective, it's so great. It's just so like immediately understandable by somebody, like from what you've just described, like that benefit is immediately understandable. And immediately sounds immense. And the fact that you can bring other folks in, to help describe a problem that you're having maybe from another perspective, and to express things that you'd forgotten about. It's just, that's amazing. If you're away from home, on the road, things like that, and it's literally like 24/7 around the clock. So how do they do that? Do they have just people like on hand?
Yeah, so we actually, we are contracted with a virtual provider network at this time, and generally customers that launch such programs, they tend to contract with such virtual care provider networks. And those providers are, screened, qualified, et cetera, by that network themselves. And then we go through, have to go through a credentialing process as well with that provider group. Those providers are always credentialed within the state that they're seeing the patient. So the first question the member has to answer is what state that they're currently in. It's defaulted to California because all of our members are in California. But if they're in a different state, they can pick, let's say Texas. If they're traveling to Texas for work, the list of available providers at that time will update for all the providers that are credentialed in Texas. And many providers are credentialed in multiple states as well.
So are there any plans to like incorporate any kind of machine learning into that technology? So to maybe give a physician like a boost, like if it was, say, a rash or something like that, that they could take a picture and then the machine learning could sort of provide some guesses and pass them on to a physician? Is that in the works at all?
That's a great question. The ability to take a picture and provide that to the video visit doctor exists today, but the machine learning part, I think, is still a little behind. I think that the industry is heading in that direction. I think more and more automation around those sorts of things is inevitable. I just I don't think we're there yet. I don't even think AML is there yet. But it is an exciting part of the future that we're going to be seeing soon in healthcare.
So what are the challenges with regards to HIPAA compliance when you are offering that kind of an open video portal?
There's many, and you need to make sure you're thinking about that in design. And in fact, Dr. Durbin, our chief medical officer, at times when we were doing the early design, was like, oh, I don't want that there. I want it to time out in 30 seconds because you could be on BART, which is our main public transportation here in the Bay, and somebody could be looking over your shoulder. So we were very conscientious about, in all aspects of design as best we could, on being HIPAA compliant and sensitive. We had done security audits end to end, and we do those annually and do remediations if we have any findings to make sure we protect the members' data in all aspects. It is a big lift, though. You have to just always have that mindset, like, not letting your child run across the street all the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think from a team perspective, it doesn't even present challenges while you're in development and testing and all that. And the Propelics team takes, every caution when dealing with PHI. And I know even Cesar sometimes will remind me that, hey, this is PHI, we should treat it this way. And I think it's always a check and balance on both ends. And the team is very well versed in PHI and being HIPAA compliant. So
yeah, it's a long list, and it's a matter of have that thinking of you're dealing with not quotes user or quotes a consumer. You are dealing with actual people with their personal data, sometimes health data. So you have to have a set of access and control. Make sure that nobody can really see anything on the production environment. Make sure you test a lot on the lower environments with data that it is not related to an individual. Make sure that all of that works before you promote to a production environment, because once you go to production, only a certain computer in a certain person in a certain time can have access to that and can actually review something if needed. So you got to reduce a lot of that to close to zero. Always try for that zero incidents on that end. And as Cathy said, we do annual reviews where a third party comes and it will analyze everything, trying to do some penetration testing, do some integrity testing, things that you never think of when you're just building a food app or a recipe app or something like that. You have to have that in mind across environments, across real world scenario like BART, like you're in the public transportation, somebody can look over your shoulder. What can they see? Make sure that you understand the limitations and the abilities that the mobile devices and the web browsers allows you to have. So you don't want to cache in memory or in a cookie any of that data. You want to make sure that when your application goes to background, the OS will not take a snapshot of it and store it in a public place where somebody can actually get access to that data. And even when we were talking about video visits, if you happen to have your visit summary that includes prescriptions or your diagnosis or anything in a PDF, how do we make sure that when it's in the app, it's secure? And if you need to export it or print it or send it via email, you understand what are the risks of taking it out of the app, and you're conscious about that decision. So it's not a surprise and it's all control. So those are the technology challenges when talking about security and HIPAA compliance.
Speaking of surprises, now that the app is out there in the App Store and Google Play, have you encountered any surprises in the way that people are using the app or in user feedback, people commenting on a section that you hadn't thought of in a certain way?
For the provider directory feature, we have to comply to state regulations from the DMHC, and so there's a Senate Bill 137 that we have to allow for the public to cite an inaccuracy if found, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet about how physicians incorrectly list if they can accept patients or not. There's a real burden for people trying to get a new PCP. So we discovered pretty early on that people utilize that feature for inaccuracy, and I just didn't expect that. And so some of them are the providers themselves, making sure that their data is correct, although we get it from their independent provider association. And that was a little bit of a surprise. For the other features, since we've pretty much just been a soft launch up to this point, I don't have enough data points. Maybe Noori does, but that's all I have right at this point. People like the user interface. I've done some surveys on our pilot users, and people have been really excited.
I'm very excited to see what comes out, and I know that we're not perfect. I know we didn't build something that is perfect, but I'm excited to iterate upon it. I'm excited to introduce new features and really look at it from the lens of how do we integrate these features that we've launched so far, and there's a lot of opportunities come.
How's the program doing today? Like, I know you had this goal of building the network from 15,000 members to 250,000 plus members. Have you been able to leverage these properties yet to sort of help build up your membership?
Biz Dev marketing team has done a tremendous amount of work to grow Canopy. We're close to 50,000, over 50,000 members this year. The Biz Dev team is constantly selling the offerings that we have in the digital space. And Noori and I participated in a webinar for them, and we can attach that webinar to this podcast if you're interested, for people to learn more. At this point in the industry, it's expected that certain innovation is there and available for members for quality care. And so we delivered that.
That's awesome. I mean, personally, this was such a rewarding project to work on. I mean, so many of our projects are just building enterprise tools to streamline processes and so forth, and, workrooms and factories. And this one was a rewarding break from that for me personally. And I'm sure it was for the rest of the team on our side as well. What do we have to look forward to from Canopy in the future? What else is in the works?
Lots of exciting things, actually. So we talk a lot about the network and the alliance providers that Canopy Health has in its network. And there's a lot of opportunity to integrate across those provider networks. It's the features that we have launched today, don't necessarily touch those systems much. So I think the next wave of features that we're looking at and that we're planning right now have to do a lot more with integration with systems and platforms across the different hospitals and providers within the network. So one example is referrals, as we mentioned, being able to have referrals be sent real time from one organization to another, and for us to be able to present referral status to members within the MyCanopyHealth app. That's one. Another integration would be scheduling. We're going to be looking at scheduling soon. And all these initiatives are quite difficult because you're looking at it from many different systems, and many different systems that use all sorts of platforms, all sorts of EHRs, and have different operations around referrals, scheduling, clinical data, etc. So scheduling is going to be another tough one that we're going to be looking to take on later this year. And then more around clinical data integration will also be coming. How do we really provide a longitudinal patient record view across the various hospitals? As I mentioned, a member can go to any of the provider groups within the network, but how do we centralize that health data so that the patient has access to that, and the providers have access to the clinical data across the network?
Any integration of wearables data with the video conferencing?
Yeah, a lot of the vendors are doing that today. I think Amwell has some devices that they're either are integrated with today or will be in the future. There's like this thermometer, a digital thermometer that a patient can use to be able to have their temperature be sent automatically to the video visit doctor. There's things like that. I think we're really looking at the market is changing and it's moving really fast. And I think we're going to watch for now. In the wearable space, there's a lot of hype, and we're trying to figure out how can we provide real value to the member. And I think we're just watching for now, really.
Sure. And do you have any plans to expand outside of the San Francisco market?
It's in the talks. At this point, we have a limited Knox-Keene license with the DMHC, Division of Managed Healthcare. So a lot of it depends on those compliance guidelines that we need to follow. So more to come.
I want to open it up to our team here. Does anybody want to say anything or ask anything?
Just as a conclusion, Steve, and Noori was saying it, I think the beauty of this project is that this is not perfect. Of course, we had a long way to think about all the functionality and how to integrate all the requirements and create a simple enough user experience so the users can get familiarized with the app. We have a long way to go to enhance all the user experience. I think for now is this essential amount of interaction we needed as a first phase of this project. This is something that had us learning a lot, and not just from a design perspective, also for the integration, because all the challenges we had as a design team was precisely that, the integration. We let the development team integrate or focus on the integration of the technology better than creating flashy and elegant, maybe UI animations or that type of interaction that will come very shortly in the near future. But for now, the project is in a very good spot to continue with the design.
Yeah, I think it's been great. It continues to be great collaborating with Canopy to build out these mobile platforms. And it's exciting to be able to work with something and work on a project and work with a team that's, very committed to, the member experience and creating a product that, is easy to use and, provides a lot of value to people in their everyday lives. So, it's just been great, the level of collaboration and working together and having, like the spirited debates to make sure that, we are building what is the best experience and, making those tough decisions as far as, design trade-offs or, any sort of decisions as far as, what needs to be done given, technology constraints or time constraints or et cetera, but still trying to focus on building, the best product and delivering it. So it's exciting, and it's exciting to, work with a company that's forward-looking as Canopy is.
That's great. Thanks. Well, Cathy and Noori, thank you so much for doing this. And my guys on my side, thank you again. So Cathy Farmer, Noori Dhillon, David Enarson, Andres Reaza, and Cesar Cavazos. You guys are easily the strongest team that I've ever worked with, and I'm humbled to work with you guys. So, and it's every day is a delight. So just wanted to put that out there.
We miss you, Steve. Miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. It'd be great to get out there, especially now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Boston is cold.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
And we'll talk soon. And thank you for hopping on to another episode of Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics, an Anexinet company. Bye-bye, everybody.